PE Sports Productions presents Clemson-Carolina, the great rivalry. Clemson University, nestled at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Tiger Town, USA, and the University of South Carolina, situated in Columbia, the state's capital, Gamecock territory. Explore 4 decades of this rivalry, the coaches, the players, the strategy. Big Thursday. Meet Coach Frank Howard, Coach Warren Gizay, Banks McFadden, Coach Frank Johnson, Bo Haken, Charlie Waters, Bobby Bryant, Fred Cohn, Dan Reeves, Bob Fulton, Benny Cunningham, Jim Phillips, the history makers, the legends that have surrounded the rivalry. You know, there's no way you can talk about Carolina and Clemson football without talking about this gentleman, Frank Howard. 39 years of service at Clemson University, 30 years as head coach. Coach, I think probably there's not been a more illustrious career. You had great times, but you had a few bad times.
Well, I tell you, I had some good times, I had some bad times, and I had everything in between. We had good years, bad years, years that wasn't worth anything. A lot of times I'd glad when the season was over. But all in all, I expect I had a pretty good career up there. I enjoyed just about all of it. I liked the people in South Carolina quite a bit, and believe it or not, I liked some of those Gamecocks. Not too many of them, but a few of them.
Believe it or not, he was a good friend of ours.
This is Frank Johnson. Frank was connected with the University of South Carolina for 15 years. Worked with the football team as the freshman coach. He was a lineman coach for a year. Also coached the basketball team for a short
That's right. That's right. I worked for Rex for about 15 years and coached football 2 years, freshman football, and line coach 1 year, and served as assistant AD after that.
Well, just as much a part of the association with South Carolina football as Coach Howard has been with Clemson football is Rex Enright, quite a gentleman.
He was. Of course, Rex was a very good friend of mine. He was a good fella, real fine gentleman, a good football coach, and really had more friends than I think anybody ever knew in my life. I want to ask you one question. On a Big Thursday, why was it stopped?
Well, Frank, it was stopped mainly because South Carolina had every advantage. Now, you know, a home team advantage is something else. But when they got the tickets and they sold all the season tickets on getting a Clemson ticket, in fact, Clemson sold the tickets for them. They had the program concession. The Clemson people had the sun in their eyes, and it was just a one-sided deal. But I might add that we had a fine arrangement worked out for the the stadium people down there, the state fair, but they nixed it. We was gonna really have us play North Carolina 1 year, and they'd play Duke. We was gonna do it on Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, and then the next year we was gonna switch. But some of their smart trustees got the idea that they couldn't stand to see Clemson drawing more people in the Carolina Stadium than South Carolina was drawing.
Frank and Rex were drawing the contract for the first game at Clemson. And at the time, Rex was sick. And we met Coach Howard up at Wade Hampton Hotel, and we had a bed. Rex laid on the bed, and Frank and Rex were talking about the contract, and we got all through, and Rex kind of shook his head, and he said, Frank, he says, I'd like to have 47 complimentary tickets for the AD. So I talked to Coach Howard. I said, well, that's fine. So we never found out what the 47 tickets were for. We never used them, and I don't think they ever used now. But I want to compliment Coach Howard. He was the nicest guy to Rex Enright when he was sick.
Well, thank you, Frank. That's the only time any of those Gamecocks ever paid me a good compliment. But I believe I know what those 47 tickets will for.
I don't know.
I believe he give them 47 complimentary tickets to Rex Bowen. And that's the best agreement I ever made because Rex Bowen decided to come to Clemson. And that's why he wanted those 46 complimentary tickets.
Well, George, you got Rex Barn from his dad. He loved Rex. I know Rex Enright. And I
Rex
talked
Barn,
to...
of course, is Rex Enright's
That's right,
grandson.
I talked to Rex Barn and his mother and dad, who are very good friends of mine. And somebody from Clemson talked to Rex and sold him on the goods. And I'll say Rex loves Clemson. He loves Clemson. He's a good football player. I started to say something else.
Frank, this thing's getting too friendly. People start thinking I like you. They might even accuse me of liking old Warren Gizet. You reckon?
I think you would. I think you would.
Coach, let's go now to the beginning. You played football at the University of Alabama, number 35. You were a good one, from all I hear.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Coach Wallace Wade never did think that.
Then you moved, of course, to Clemson, and you were on the staff with Jess Neely, and then took over when he went out to Rice.
Well, that's true. He tried to take me out to Rice with him. Sometimes I wonder if I should have gone. With all this oil shortage, I think maybe I should have gone. I'd probably had one of those oil wells out there now.
There's some people at South Carolina we should touch on, of course, because they had their contributions and their successes or failures as they were. Coach Marvin Bass, nice guy. He had not quite as much success as I think he would like to have had.
It's amazing how Marvin turned up at South Carolina. Rex's choice of the head coach of Carolina. And, of course, Rex had died, but Marvin was hired as football coach at Carolina then.
And then, of course, came Paul Dietzel.
I think Paul Dietzel was probably one of the best businessmen I've ever seen, I've ever heard of.
I think so, too, because when they brought Dietzel down there, you know, I wasn't making much money at Clemson, and fortunately, we won the first 2 years, I believe he was there, and they raised my pay to almost his. And that means about $500 a month to me the rest of my life on my retirement. And I'll tell you one thing, you can say what you please about that Dietzel, but I love that devil.
We've been talking with Frank Johnson, who was on the staff at the University of South Carolina for 15 years in various capacities, and, of course, Coach Frank Howard of Clemson University, and he's going to be back, and you'll hear a lot more from him. Next up, Bo Hagan at Banks McFadden with the great stars of Carolina Clemson football in just 1 minute. Joining me now are two gentlemen who had a lot to do with the success of Carolina and Clemson football during, I guess, the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. One of them is Bo Hagan, who was one of the outstanding quarterbacks for South Carolina in the late 40s. And, of course, over here to my right is a fellow that just has all kind of distinctions sitting in his trophy chest. He, for one thing, was the first man to make All-American in basketball and football, a great track star, Banks McFadden. Gentlemen, I'm glad to have you here because we're going to be looking at some of the people that certainly have meant a lot to both of you and as much as you meant to your respective universities. Currently, Bo is the director of the USC Alumni Association, and Coach McFadden is the director of intramural athletics at Clemson University, so very much involved in your schools as they are now. Bo, I think that when you were at South Carolina, one of the great people that you worked with and played with was Steve Wadiak. We're going to talk about him and people like Bishop Strickland. As far as you're concerned, in your era, that was a guy named Charlie Timmons against Boston College did a pretty doggone good job running, didn't he?
He did an excellent job. He was a fine fullback.
As a matter of fact, if you look at Charlie Timmons right here, you see what kind of guy he was. He carried the ball awfully well. I think in this particular segment, you see how well he dives right on through the line, and of course, after a short gain, he picks up some yardage. And here he goes again. And this time, right down to about the 1 yard line.
This was against the Boston College in the Cotton Bowl, and the score was 6-3, and Charlie was the one that scored the only touchdown for us. As I said, he was a very strong young man, did an excellent job for us, and we were very fortunate to win that ball game 6-3.
Let's take a look at on the reverse side of things now. Lou Sossaman, defensive tackle, great center for Carolina. This case, he was making some hits in there that really stopped some of the Clemson thrusts. One man, if there's anybody that represents South Carolina football any more than Bo Hagan does in the late 40s, and certainly you did so well, is Steve Wadiak. He was a tremendous athlete out of Chicago.
Yeah, Steve came from the sandlots of Chicago, Jim, and came to the University of South Carolina and was a great runner for 4 years. He had just outstanding ability. He was built like a weightlifter. He had sprinter speed and was just an unbelievably keen competitor.
And of course, until 1973, when Jeff Grant set a new all-time rushing record for South Carolina with 260 yards against Ohio, Steve Wadiak held that record of 256 against whom? Clemson University, right?
That's right.
And I suppose at that time there could have been no one that he would like to have gotten against more. Here's typical of Steve Wadiak right now in a great run. He's number 37, of course.
He's 37, and notice the great balance that he has. He was only about 5'9", weighed about 195 pounds, but he had great balance, Jim.
And he could take people right along with him, too.
Very difficult man to tackle. It was a great comfort to a quarterback to look in the huddle and have Steve Wadiak to hand the ball off to.
I would imagine so. Here he is on another one. Notice this is in Carolina Stadium. Those light poles that used to bother everybody, except the people on the field, of course. Here's Wadiak again.
Wadiak was a star for 4 years, and his untimely death immediately after his senior season deprived him of a great pro career, I feel.
I guess, Coach McFadden, when you were up at Clemson, coaching up there, one of the assistant coaches, he was really a scourge for the Tigers, wasn't he?
He certainly was. He was a terrific athlete. We admire all great ones, regardless of who has them. We would like to have him myself, but he did a great job at the University of South Carolina.
You know, coincidentally, Bo, there was another running back at South Carolina did an excellent job, and that's Bishop Strickland. And he was kind of lost a little bit in the glory of Steve Wadiak.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys named Joe in the backfield when we played with Steve Wadiak. But Bishop Strickland was a fullback and did team with Steve Wadiak. And it was a great combination to have Strickland run inside and Wadiak outside.
Coach McFadden, I want to move along to a man that I know both of you have had so much respect for. Especially at Clemson, you were delighted to have Bobby Gage there because the things he did for you, as the example a while ago of the fake quick kick. He could do so many different things. He was a great runner.
He could do all the things that a triple threat needs to do. He had to be able to kick, pass, and run accurately. And Bobby was very efficient at all those things.
Here he is, typical of the single wing formation now. That's, of course, Bobby Gage with the ball.
Bobby had good speed, he had good balance. He did a tremendous job at Clemson. This is your quick kick, not only deep punch. And that was added to the old single wing because at that time you took advantage of a safety being up close. And Bobby got off a great kick, got it over the safety man's head, and that's what the name of the game was in the single wing.
He kicked the ball from his own 30 to the 5, 65 yards. In 1948, one of the really big routs Clemson ever scored, a 53-0 drubbing of Presbyterian, took place at night. And again, indicative of the single wing is this type of action. Look at this running here. Boy, I'll tell you, Clemson was really flying, Coach.
Those were back in the days of Bobby Gage, who was the tailback. You'll see him in action at the present time. That makes a real nice cutback run. I believe this will be Bobby again on a, no, it's the fullback. It's straight up the middle. He did an excellent job of running with it.
Pitch out.
Pitch out to Gage, and then he went all the way for the touchdown.
Really an exciting athlete, wasn't he?
Definitely so.
Though about 10 years later, two came on the scene at the University of South Carolina, Alex Hawkins and King Dixon. Of course, Hawkins went on to play in the pros. But now those were two fellas who really made things happen on a football field.
Yeah, as you say, Jim, in the late 50s, Carolina football was paced by two great athletes, Hawkins and Dixon. I was fortunate enough to see them when they came to Texas and beat Darrell Royal in his first year.
Well, they're both fine athletes. We would have loved to have had them at Clemson.
As a matter of fact, you'd like to have Bo at Clemson, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. We thought we had him at one time.
Dixon's number 20 and Hawkins is 41.
And here goes Dixon again, down the right sideline, slashing his way downfield, and he makes another excellent run. They were really exciting. In this particular sequence, again, here's South Carolina in action, offensively. Quarterback takes the ball, bootleg. Now, here's Dixon with the ball, keeping it, rolling down the sideline, and he's going to unload the ball, and it goes to Hawkins, and Hawkins is downfield. I tell you, they could
really complemented.
They could
really complemented each other, and this is the play that beat the University of Texas that year.
A lot of history made that time.
When you have one could throw to the other, and vice versa, and that's real tough to both sides of the defense.
When we think of Clemson football, there's one name amongst the many that really stands out in my mind, and that's Fred Cone. Fred was an excellent athlete, of course, still associated with the intramural program at Clemson University. Indicative of his type of run would be something like I think we would see here. He just kind of, after he gets the ball, it's kind of leisurely, almost a walk-in for the touchdown. Hey, that's Fred Cone, guys.
Great.
How you gentlemen doing?
Clemson's great. Fred, good to see you.
No doubt about that. Good to see you.
Fred, you know, it was said of you by Coach Frank Howard that you're probably the best guy ever coached in football.
Well, he exaggerates a lot, as you know, Coach Howard. I appreciate it, though.
I disagree with Fred on that particular thing. Coach Howard is definitely right. I think Fred's one of the finest backs Clemson's ever had, and I might say we were happy to see him when we did because things were rough when Fred arrived at our place. He's one of the greatest Clemson's ever had.
And even when you get caught on the sideline, anywhere it was, with your extra effort, that was a big thing. Extra effort in football is very important, and I think that this is indicative. Looks like you got a pretty clear berth right here after you get this handoff.
Yeah, look at that hole. Anybody could run through there, couldn't
Yeah, but Fred had a habit of never being knocked backwards. Watch him, he'll always fall forward, and that gives you 2 or 3 extra yards, and that's the name of the game of football.
I think there was a good extra 5 in that one. You had some great guys with you then, too. Jackie Calvert.
Oh, yeah, Jackie was All-American, and he surely deserved to be. He was a great player for us. We had lots of good players.
That offensive line obviously did a good job for you. We saw that a while ago. The holes opened up beautifully.
They sure did. It made it easy for a fullback, I'll tell you.
Fred, what is your greatest memory of Clemson?
Well, I guess getting a diploma.
Which is probably the thing that all of us should fall. All right, what we're going to do next, gentlemen, thank you, Bo Hagan, University of South Carolina, Fred Cohn, and Banks McFadden of Clemson. Next up, Frank Howard returns, and we'll welcome Warren Gizet as we look at the changing styles of offensive football in just a moment. As we continue, we're going to talk about the styles, changes, and offenses in football and how these things came about. And I don't think there are 2 better people qualified to do that than Coach Frank Howard, whom we welcome back, and Warren Gizet, whose era as head coach at the University of South Carolina was from 1956 to 1960. Coach Howard, you've seen these changes come about through the years, and why don't you just give us a little bit of the comparison of how things evolve?
Well, Jim, you know, football is kind of like a lady's dress or a man's tie. It's just stylish. You take somebody like old Bear Bryant, say Dow Royal, Notre Dame, some of those places. They get a formation, a certain play, a style, and it's successful. They've usually copied it from some successful high school coach. But I think most all the football started way back on in the teens, the 90s. And is the first thing that happened, they had 11 men, of course, and all of them started with a T formation. They had the man under the center, the quarterback was under the center. About 2 or 3 yards back to him was the fullback. To each side of the fullback was the halfbacks. And back when I played at Alabama, and from, say, 28, 29, 30, everything was a single wing.
This is the box formation here.
Now, actually, yeah, that's the box, and you see they had a little fancy. They had a man in motion a little bit. But from the box, they went to a single wing, and actually the main thing about a single wing, the difference, single wing and a box, was that as a rule, the single wing had an unbalanced line. Now, some people, I should say, had a balanced single wing. General Neyland's single wing over in Tennessee was a balanced line. Now, one thing about the single wing, which I ran until about 1952, I believe, you could quick kick so well from it. You saw that good quick kick there against Boston College. That was Booty Payne, and they called him Booty, I think, because he could kick so far. And this is a good game here. This was a 1941 game. That's from the single wing. You notice the Charlie Timmons, and Warren, you played with Timmons somewhere, I believe.
Timmons in 1945, I believe, in service.
Well, was he good in 1945? He was great in 1941. And he was a good football official. There's another good quick kick from the single wing. And it might interest people to know that one reason Banks McFadden made All-American was that he quick kicked so well against Tulane down there in 1939. He kicked that ball all over the field.
Why'd you give up the single wing, Frank?
Well, I'll tell you, you fellas using the T formation caused me to give it up. And that big linebacker South Carolina had, you know, in that single wing, you had to pull guards, you had to pull tackles. They had that big old boy linebacker, Jabush, is that his name?
Harry Jabush.
Harry Jabush. Well, I can see that sucker. We'd pull those linemen, you know, and Coach Enright wasn't any dummy. We'd be pulling those linemen. The two guards go this way, the tackle go that way, and here'd come old Jabush. And we'd have 3rd and 2, and then we'd end up, it'd be 4th and 20. Actually, you have to be a pretty good football coach to use that single wing. Each boy in that single wing's a specialist.
Get an illustration of how Coach Gizay's offense worked, the split T offense. And this is your first win over Coach Howard in 1958.
Well, this was that 58 ball game. I think it was a great game for Carolina. That Stan Spears running the football ended up 26-6 in favor of Carolina. It was the only time that we were able to beat Clemson while I was coaching. That's a tight T formation that you see there. Power offense. Some people nicknamed it 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but it did have its effectiveness, and this is one of Clemson's very fine football teams, so we're happy to come out on top in that ball game.
Warren, I believe that's the day, the first time you scored against me, I tipped my hat to you. But I tell you, during that second half, I tipped it every time he scored. During that second half, my head got mighty sunburned, to tell you the truth.
Hawkins and Dixon were the halfbacks in that ball game and did a great job both offensively and defensively. We had to play both ways in those days, Frank.
Let's take a look at the Dietzel era Carolina and how, after the split T, and Paul Dietzel's offense went to the I formation, and he had the advantage of such people as Warren Muir at fullback and Tommy Suggs at quarterback. And on this play, Warren Muir is running the ball and really gets off a great run here before he's finally wrestled down. And that was indicative of the way the I offense could run.
Well, I think the offense has opened up. Frank has told you about the single wing and the box formation and so on. And now the offense is open to the point where you can throw, you can run, you can sweep, you can pass. And I think that's more typical of football today. And, of course, the pros have to entertain people, and the colleges copied this more wide-open offense from the pros. Actually, almost every one of the offenses that use the option play are taken from the split T, the veer, the Y formation, and so on, are really variations of the old split T.
Well, Warren, I tell you, I don't think Dietzel invented that I formation. Old Tom Nugent had the I way back yonder.
And he found it from some high school coach that used it in 1919.
That's right. It's nothing new in football, Jim. All of it is just a variation. You know, Warren had a good offense, and in my opinion, he's the best coach they've ever had down here at South Carolina. And he went out in Texas one time. I remember he went out in Texas and beat the University of Texas. And they had Darrell Royal down there talking to the quarterback club, and they made a big to-do over old Darrell, you know. He was the speaker. There's old Warren sitting back there. I don't even think they introduced him. Them people in Columbia didn't appreciate Warren very much.
It was Darrell's first loss at Texas, Frank, and Darrell and I played together at Oklahoma.
Well, I didn't know you ever played football, DJ. I didn't know you ever played. I used to tell on him all the time. I'd heard about people moving every time the rent came due. And he's the only student I ever heard of change college every time the grades came out.
The Hootie Ingram era brought about the I Pro set was a little different because it had just another wrinkle or two, and I think that in that era, which started around 1970, Charlie Waters and Tommy Kendrick and Ray Yarger really executed that awfully well, Coach.
Well, about this is the time when they began to use the man in motion, the flanker, the pro set, and so on to really open the offense up.
Well, Kendrick did a good job passing. Yarger did a good job running for Hootie. And really, I didn't think he did anything that I hadn't seen before. Most of the stuff I had done, too. Now, that's just the old split back with a end. That looks like old Yarger running with that ball there. He can really put them down and pick them up, or pick them, whatever I'm trying to say. He can do it good. Look, watch this run he makes him. No, that's a pass.
Kendrick.
That's Kendrick.
It's a tremendous play, and it results in a touchdown.
Well, I think it took Hootie a long time to get that play time to perfection. Actually, you know, a lot of people really believe you do that, but that's just a play that the boy made up. It's good reaction on Kendrick's part and on that receiver's part and on his lineman's part.
Well, football's a game of change, and it goes full cycle. As Frank mentioned earlier, the T formation started this whole thing, and here we've gone back around through all the box, the single wing, and we're back to the T formation again.
And the veer, and that's what we're going to look at now, as executed by, in 1975, in this particular segment, Jim Carlin had a quarterback I think has to be regarded as one of the best ever to play in South Carolina, Jeff Grant's number 12, and his timing was always superb, and he had great running backs, Clarence Williams, of course, and Kevin Long.
Jeff Grant's, of course, one of the great athletes that Carolina's ever had, a very bright boy, and I'd rank him up with Fuller, of course, one of Clemson's great athletes. Great
pro player these days with the Pittsburgh Steelers is Benny Cunningham, and indicative of the kind of receiver that he's been is in this from 1974, the Tigers going at it against Georgia Tech. And of course, at this particular point in his career, Cunningham was really achieving great success, and there he is scoring a touchdown for the Clemson Tigers.
He's lucky to survive the touchdown.
That's right. His own teammates could well do him in a situation like that. We talked about Benny Cunningham. Another fabulous receiver for Clemson has been All-American Jerry Butler. Steve Fuller, fabulous quarterback. I think everybody agrees with that. Flip it out here to Fuller and look at to Butler. That catch was, I think, phenomenal.
Well, you know, that catch is pretty hard to break up when you throw one down there right on the dirt, you might say. But the best catch Butler ever made was against South Carolina, in my opinion. I think more people liked that, and then more people hated it than any other catch he ever made.
But, you know, we can look at the offenses, we can look at the defenses of football as they've changed over the years, but really it all boils down to the same. As you say, nothing is really new under the sun, and the basics remain the same.
Blocking and tackling.
Well, you better play pretty good pass defense nowadays, too, Warren. They throw that ball a good bit now. I'll tell you, I like the game the way it's played now. It's wide open. They got those split ends. They got the men in motion. And somebody come back just like you used to do with that old full backfield, like old Bear Bryant does. They call it the wishbone. And he got those big old boys, and they just start up through there, and that fullback looks like thunder. They tell me he's playing somebody down there, and the Alabama right guard looked at the guard right in front of him. He said, "I don't know what you're going to do, buddy," but said, "Old Big Davis is going to run with this ball," and says, "I'm going to get out of the way. He ain't not going to run over me."
We are going to continue with part 2 of Carolina-Clemson football. I want to thank Coach Warren Gazay and Coach Frank Howard for being with us in this segment. Today we're at Clemson University, and in this particular setting I'm going to be talking to Banks McFadden, truly one of the great athletes to have played anywhere collegiately in America. He was the only man, or at least the first, to have made All-America in 2 sports in the same year, basketball and football, in the same collegiate year. That was in 1939. And then on the other side is Joe Bostic, who is a little bit more current in the scheme of things. Joe is a 2-time ACC performer, offensive lineman, and then, of course, 2-time All-America, currently with the St. Louis Cardinals of the National Football League. Coach McFadden, first of all, I think in showing the difference in equipment, you have to go back a long way. As far as we can go back right now is 1919. Shoulder pads and the helmets were far different from now.
That's true, and was a very flimsy piece of material that they tried to use at those times, but also they didn't have the sophisticated material that they have that you get bruised with. So this is about as much protection as they used in 19 and 19. And the shoulder pad. Then from the helmet, as you can see, they didn't have much more protection than that. There's a little felt on the inside, have a little protection on the head to keep with your head, and therefore it protected you pretty well with the equipment that we were wearing at that modern day time.
And of course, it was a little later, probably in the late 40s, that they came into the use of the plastic helmets, and even then more protection had to be added. Joe Bostic, looking at the 2 helmets we have here, one of them, and these are practice helmets, by the way. Here's the 1975 version, and in this we see a far greater difference from the 1940 style.
Sure do, Jim. Like you said, they have taken advantage of the plastic here instead of leather, which is a lot sturdier type material. And there's a little more padding in here and everything, and plus the advantage of a face mask has made the helmet from really something they tried to protect, and maybe in Coach McFadden's day, to a weapon as it's used now.
In that, of course, spearing is a great problem, and that's a rule that's enforced in all areas of football, so the prospect of injuries are cut down. This newer style helmet, and this is the one that you'll see used in high school, college, and the pros now, the air pocket helmet, that gives even greater protection because it really forms a pocket of air between the shell and the head.
Right, Jim, these things are devised when you hit, the blows should be distributed all through the head where you're not really taking a blow in a certain area. It's just distributed all through your whole head. But this is a fine helmet here. And I think the thing that most people is look at a helmet like this right now, this helmet will become obsolete one day. They have so many people working on research and stuff, and this helmet in years to come will be a model like this will be an obsolete helmet. And I think it's good that they work hard and try to find the techniques and advantages to wearing safer helmets in the football.
Of course, one of the most important things is the bigger the guys get, the harder they hit, and the more protection you really need.
Sure, they're getting bigger and faster and stronger, and like I said, that with this helmet, with the helmets they're using right now, they're getting to the point where your head is a weapon, and it's a very dangerous weapon, probably the best weapon you have, even much more powerful than either your hands or your legs. I think your head is probably the best weapon you have out there.
Well, Coach McFadden and Joe Bostic have given us just a brief demonstration to some of the most important differences in the football equipment used from the old times back 60, 70 years ago right up to current day, and you can see there is a vast difference, and that just touches on part of it. Well, of course, here at Clemson, we're going to make a quick transition, and as we do, we're going to head a bit south. From Frank Howard Field at Clemson now to Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, the home of the South Carolina Fighting Gamecocks. The next element we're going to talk about as we continue the great rivalry is something that's common to all football stadiums across country, and that is having communication from the field level up to the press box, to the coaches. Coach Richard Bell, the defensive coordinator for USC, is with me right now. Richard, in the course of a game, how many guys will you have in the booth with you?
Jim, you generally have 3 on offense and 3 on defense, with 2 on both sides of the ball having headsets on, and then 1 guy's up there generally that would do most of the writing for us.
All right, from the, say, let's take maybe everything is not going as it should defensively, and you want to make the changes very quickly. How much time do you think will be involved from the point that you start to accomplishing what you're after, if you get there?
Right. Well, what we like to do is that we like to be able to make the change within 2 or 3 plays, and sometimes that is controlled a little bit. If it's a defense that we're going to have to change, that can probably be done a little bit easier because we can hand signal that in. But if it's a way that we want to change a technique that we're playing with a particular position, it's how quickly we can make the substitute understand what we want done and get on the field. But we're always hopeful that a series of downs will not pass before we can make a change if necessary.
Communications have changed drastically over the years in football, actually from every level, I suppose, high school right up to pro. And you can recall some of those, and there have been a lot of changes very quickly, really.
They really have, I hadn't been in it that long, but, I can remember, of course, when I was playing, when I first started out coaching, that everybody was down on the field, and there wasn't any thought of putting anybody in the press box. But things have progressed, and, they went to just the old telephone system right there. You had to punch a button to talk or to listen, to walkie-talkies, and now they've got, these headsets and everything where it's a very good system and one that everybody is using now.
It's Richard Bell, the defensive coordinator at Carolina, briefly on the communication from the field level up to the guys in the press box, and they run the show a lot more than you think. We'll continue with the great rivalry, Carolina-Clemson, in just a moment. The rivalry between the Clemson Tigers and the South Carolina Gamecocks began in 1896. We've been visiting with 4 decades of the legends of that game.
I remember when the University of South Carolina offered me a scholarship, I couldn't wait to sign. I got several offers after playing in an all-star game in the state of Georgia, but I decided to go to the University of South Carolina, a decision which I've never regretted. It was a school that gave me a great education, a school which I thought had a great athletic program. It's gotten better since I left there.
Well, when I was initially signed up at Clemson, my only goals were to make the team. I tried to take goals one at a time. I didn't come into Clemson with the idea of being an All-American or anything like that. My initial goal was just to make the team and to play as good and as much as possible.
I played at the University of South Carolina in 1964, 1965, and 1966. 1964, we beat Clemson 7-6, a really close game. Then in 1965, Coach Bass's last year, in my junior year, we beat Clemson 17-16.
Of course, everybody follows our alma mater, but I really love Clemson. I had a chance to go to a lot of different schools when I was coming up, and I chose to go to Clemson. And of course, I would never, if I had to do it over again, I'd do the exact same thing.
As far as my personal life is concerned, well, I can't say that I had set anything in particular, you know, as far as it's concerned. But when you're playing football, you have somewhat of an obligation to your public as well, you know, especially here at Clemson. You have so many small kids, you know, who look at you and look up to you. And as far as myself is concerned, I have two younger brothers, and my parents are always getting on me about setting examples for them.
But one of the great things about the University of South Carolina as far as playing football there was a great rivalry that we had with Clemson.
And that was always a big game for us, no matter whether we had won a game during the rest of the season or not. Whenever we played Clemson, that was the biggest game of the season for us. And there was always a lot of fun getting ready for the game, a lot of excitement the week of the game, and then when we actually played the game, it was almost too much to stand.
Yeah, I'm very thankful that I've experienced the things I experienced at Clemson. To me, it's a perfect place to go to college.
Of course, part of the excitement of football is the man who brings you the play-by-play. We have two of the best right here. Bob Fulton for the University of South Carolina, play-by-play since 1952, with the exception of a year or two away. And since 1968, the voice of the Clemson Tigers, Jim Phillips. This game means a lot more than just another ball game, Bob.
You bet it does, to all the fans, to the coaches, particularly to the players, and to the broadcasters, to the writers. Everyone's emotionally involved in this game, and you've got to send it right down the middle and do a good job.
Absolutely right. Bing Crosby probably said it best. Straight down the middle. But
you wasn't talking about his golf game, was
No,
he?
not really.
Okay, go ahead.
One of the great stars of South Carolina has been former All-American now with the Minnesota Vikings, Bobby Bryant. Exciting ball player.
Oh, Bobby was a Super Bowl player. I didn't see Bobby play a lot. I was away at that time, but I recall one game he was involved in, the dedicatory game at Carter Stadium in Raleigh, North Carolina. He ran a punt back 97 yards to give Carolina their only win of that season. They went 1-9 that year.
And another series of events that we're going to allude to in just a moment has to do with a fellow who really wasn't a great star, but he was a good quarterback. He was the son of Coach Frank Howard at Clemson University. And we're talking about Jimmy Howard. Now, Jimmy was a fellow who played for the Tigers before you arrived there.
That's right.
But at the same time, I think that you know enough about him to be able to kind of give us an idea of just how he could play the game.
Well, I know Jimmy pretty well. I've seen him play a lot of rugby. But here you see him as he sweeps to his left and goes in for a touchdown against the Gamecocks. And that had to be a great thrill for not only Jimmy, but for his dad, Coach Howard, to see his son score in that 63 game against South Carolina. That's got to be a big one.
Incidentally, Roy Pierce tacked on the extra point in that. You talk about South Carolina standouts and Clemson stands out. Really, there have been so many. But one fellow who means a lot, not only historically to the University of South Carolina, when you think back to the 60s, but right now in the broadcast booth with you every Saturday is Tommy Suggs.
Yeah, Tommy does an excellent job. He has a good grasp of the game. He has a good sense of humor. He doesn't second-guess much. And he's a delight to work with. And, of course, he was one of the outstanding football players, you know, as a quarterback. He set more records than anyone at Carolina. Very exciting player, not a big man, but he proved once again you don't have to be big to play good football.
I don't think any of us will ever forget the game in 1968, the come from behind. He and Randy Yoakum really teamed up at quarterback to win that one against North Carolina.
Yes, and the one in '69, too, which really took them to the Peach Bowl against VPI up at Blacksburg, Virginia. He and Ziegler were a great combination.
Coincidentally, around that era was a fellow named Buddy Gore, and he was one of the first exciting backs you ever saw up at Clemson, right, Jim?
Oh, no question about it. The only time that I saw Buddy, though, was in '68, and he had a lot of injuries. But if you go back to '67, here's a good example. He became the first, and up until this past season, '78, the only Clemson player ever to rush for over 1,000 yards in one season. He had that great ability to change directions, as you'll see by this footage here. Buddy is going to take it out of the I formation and sweep to the left. And this is just a beautiful, beautiful run. He's going to elude tacklers, then just turn it back against the grain, gets away, and carries for big yardage. And what had to be one of his great runs in the year of 1967 Buddy Gore, a long, long remembered name at Clemson, believe me.
Well, you better believe it, and he was a perfect tailback out of the eye, just perfect.
And then there was another great one, Carolina, named Gambrell.
Right, Jim. Gambrell of Carolina was a great running back. Here in the Carolina-Clemson game, he takes a pitch from Costin, the quarterback, and jams the ball right down to the 15-yard line. Billy Gambrell was not only a fine offensive back, he was an outstanding defensive back. Here you see him picking off a Tiger aerial right up against the Clemson bench on the far sideline. Down the sideline into Tiger territory to set up another Carolina score. Unusual play. Costin hands off to Day, the fullback. In the air, fumbles the ball. Costin, the quarterback, grabs it, runs down the far sideline and goes all the way in for the touchdown. And Gambrell ran it over for the extra point, and Carolina defeated Clemson 21-14.
Bob, the year is 1968, and we're going to get a look at a quarterback by the name of Charlie Waters. As you see him roll to his right, throw downfield to Mike Funderburk at the 42-yard line, a 13-yard pickup against Wake Forest in the season's opener. Now you see Charlie's running ability as he rolls to his right, finds no receiver, gets a good block from Benny Michael, then takes it down the sidelines, and that's an 8-yard pickup for Waters. A little later in that season's opener against Wake Forest in 68, you'll see Charlie back to throw, finds no one again, rolls to his left, that good speed on the corner, and then that good balance as he turns it back inside, scampers down the sidelines. That's a 20-yard pickup to the Wake Forest 27-yard line. Once again, Charlie Waters.
And Jim, here's another former Dallas Cowboy, now an assistant coach with Dallas, Dan Reeves, outstanding quarterback at Carolina, scrambling to his right, firing down the middle to his favorite target, J.R. Wilburn, for a gain of 22 yards in the Clemson-Carolina game of 1963. Now you'll see Dan Reeves at his best. Rolls to his right, looks for a receiver, can't find anyone open, and scrambles down the sideline and gets it down to the Tigers' 30-yard line. Dan Reeves from Americus, Georgia. Here you'll see him make the pitch to Sammy Anderson. The Gamecocks culminated this drive with a touchdown, but lost the game to the Tigers 24-20.
All right, Bob, you're going to see a lot of scrambling by a young competitor from Stone Mountain, Georgia, Tommy Kendrick. But our subject in this piece is Ray Yager, whom you see on the receiving end of this Kendrick pass inside the 10 and really battling his way into the end zone for a Clemson TD. Once again, let's look, Bob, at that combination of Kendrick to Yager. This is the game against Georgia Tech in 70. Tommy back to throw and finds Ray, who is on a fly pattern down the right sideline. What a grab over the defender and out of bounds at the 1-yard line. Now, here's Ray at his best. He was known as a punishing runner, and you'll get an idea of just what I mean. Look at him as he finds the hole over right tackle, and another touchdown for Ray Yager. We've just seen Ray Yager as a pass receiver, but when you talk about receivers at Clemson, you must mention big number 85 from Seneca, Benny Cunningham. Look at him grab that Markfeller's pass for a touchdown. Oh, that big young man who has moved on to the Pittsburgh Steelers punished some bodies when he was a Clemson Tiger. Once again, now an opportunity to see Cunningham in action. This is Mike O'Kane at quarterback. This will be a quick slant over the middle. O'Kane's pass is on the money, and Cunningham wide open in the end zone for another Tiger touchdown.
One of the finest athletes to ever play at Carolina was quarterback Jeff Grants. Here you see him in the game of 1975 against Georgia Tech, scrambling to his left. Finds Randy Chastain deep down the sideline, gets behind the Tech defender at the 12, and takes it into the end zone for a touchdown. Grant's rolling to his right. Wide open is Kevin Long at the goal line and in for the touchdown. Gamecocks won it 27-13. Carolina Ole Miss 1975 at Jackson, Mississippi. Nemeth getting a Jeff Grants pass in the end zone for a Carolina touchdown. One of the most exciting wins ever for the Gamecocks. Later on in the ball game, Jeff Grants rolling to his left, finds the wideout receiver Scott Thomas in the end zone, and Scotty comes up with a great catch for a touchdown. Ole Miss scored a late touchdown, less than 2 minutes to go. Time running out. Grant's back to throw. Logan on a fly pattern down the sideline, and it's in there for a touchdown, and Carolina wins the football game 35-29.
Let's take a look now at Steve Fuller. This is a game against VPI. And Fuller, as he rolls to his right, looks to pitch out, but on that option that he ran so well, he finds daylight, and there is nothing but Steve Fuller running downfield for a long, long 75-yard touchdown run. Steve Fuller, now in the red of Kansas City, but as you see him here, obviously enraptured in Clemson orange. While Steve Fuller was at Clemson, one of his favorite targets was number 15, Jerry Butler, now of the Buffalo Bills. And take a look here as he finds Butler over the middle. This also in the VPI game. Jerry gets outside, eludes tacklers, and downfield he goes for 32 yards. The Fuller to Butler combination again in probably as important a play as the Tigers had in their magnificent 78 season against Maryland. Butler over the middle, Fuller finds him, and look at Jerry go as he picks it off at his own 28, and it's clear sailing as the Tigers wrap up an ACC championship.
And of course, Jim, it'll be a long time before anyone forgets that thrilling Carolina-Clemson game in 1979, a 13-9 decision for the Gamecocks. And leading the Carolina team was All-America tailback George Rogers.
The 1982 football season for the University of South Carolina has not been one of the best they've had. But very often, under a first-year head coach, as is the case with Richard Bell, things don't quite seem to fall in place as quickly as you'd like. And that has happened. But knowing Coach Bell, being an observer of football in the state for a long time, and knowing the kind of person, the individual he is, the coaching ability that he has, and the people around him, and their ability to recruit, South Carolina indeed has a very bright future. So the Gamecock fans should have reason for optimism. Remember also, there's a lot to be said for what's happened to Clemson with their football team in the past several years. National championship in 1981, the optimum, and they've repeated with another outstanding season. But no matter who wins or who loses, when South Carolina and Clemson play, it's the great rivalry. So on that Saturday, it makes no difference at all. But win, lose, or tie, the fans can remember one thing is for sure. There is always next year.